So today we are going to be building an inventory management system. And anytime that I get started with building the backend for a project, I always just think it's kind of nice to get a picture of what it is going to look like on the front end and what kind of functionality we are going to be offering for users. So today, if you can imagine, we're going to be having an application. In order for users to access an application, they have to create an account. An account can be created with a name, an email, and a password. Once the account has been created, the user can also log in using an email and a password. And then once they are in the application, once they have successfully signed in, they will see a screen that kind of looks like this, right? We'll have a welcome banner. In this application, the user will be able to filter products by a specific category. So if you can imagine clicking on this drop-down menu, we can see different categories on there and filter the catalog that way. We also want to allow the users to add a product. We want to allow them to edit a product as well as delete a product in the catalog. So let's imagine that we click on the edit product. In that case, we would be taken to a screen that has different fields that can be edited. The user can then add information on here and save those changes. If we wanted to add a product, the user would then be taken to another screen where they can upload an image and then fill out the fields necessary for us to add a product to our database and then have that be displayed in our catalog. Okay, the next step is we are going to go ahead and get our Xano workspace set up. So we're going to be starting here on this screen. Let's go ahead and get started with setting this up. The first thing is we are going to provide a name for our workspace. I'm going to go ahead and label this inventory management system. Then we can identify here what front end we are going to be using. Xano can plug in to any front end, so you can select the one that you'll be using on here. This basically allows us to customize content for you. Today, we're just going to keep things simple, and I'm going to select I haven't decided yet. And then we are going to identify if we are importing data from another service. You may be starting fresh with Xano, or maybe your data lives somewhere else, like an Airtable, so you can select that here. For today's project, I'm going to select external database /API because we'll be getting our data from that external API. Perfect. Let's go ahead and select Get Started here. And on this page is where we are going to go ahead and set up our database tables. Our database tables is where our information is going to live. So let's quickly go back to our slides here and talk about the tables that we are going to need for this project. So for our inventory management system, we are going to have 3 tables in total. We're going to have our user table. This is going to keep track of all of our users. Within that user table, we're going to have different fields, different information that we're collecting from each user. In this case, we'll have a unique ID for each user. We'll have a created app field. That is basically going to tell us when the user was created, when that record was created in our database. Then we're going to have a name, an email, and a password. We're also going to have a category table. That category table is also going to include a unique ID, the created app field, and then the field category that is going to be text. That's just going to be the name of the category. And then we're going to have a product table. The product table is going to host all of the data for each of our products. So this is going to include a unique ID, a created app field, the title of the product, the price, description. We're going to make a table reference to our category table. So that way we can see specifically what category is associated with each product. Now, typically here is where a question comes up, and that is, why wouldn't we just type in the name of the category for each product, right? So if we had like a category called electronics, why wouldn't we just type that in the product record? And the reason why is why it's important to kind of keep this data separate is to make sure that we're keeping everything cleaned. So if we were to go that route where we're just typing in the category in each of the product records, let's say that we have a typo, right? If we misspell electronics, the next time that our user is filtering by that specific category, they're not going to see the full list of those products that contain the electronics category. So we're just kind of making sure that we're dotting all of our I's there, making sure that all of our data stays clean. And then also, let's say that you want to rename the category. Maybe you have like a jewelry category, and maybe you want to change that to like bling bling or something. If you were to do that, then you would have to go through each product record and edit that category field to match the specific one that you want. If we do the table reference, you only have to do that in one place, and then it gets edited in all of your products. Oops, I'm sorry. And then we're also going to have the quantity field on here. That's going to let us know how many products exist. And then we are going to have the product image. Awesome. So let's go ahead and we can add those tables on here. So we already have the user one that auto-populated for us. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the category one. And then we will add the product table. Now, down here, we'll see that this statement is checked here. This is basically signifying that we want to create CRUD API endpoints for the database tables that we have defined up here. Now, CRUD API endpoints represent specific operations that we can perform on our database tables. So I'm going to leave this checked because I want to be able to perform these operations on my data. Create basically, or CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. Create basically says, hey, you can create a record in each of these tables. Read is like retrieving, so you can retrieve a database record. You can update a database record, and then you can also delete a database record. So again, I'm going to leave that checked because I want to be able to interact with my database tables in that way. Let's go ahead and continue. We're not going to dive into this today, but I do want to let you know that this is available. We do have pre-built extensions that enable features in your application. So for example, we have this SandGrid email extension here. If we wanted to send an email to our users anytime that they create an account, for example, we can bring in this extension here. It will require that you have a SandGrid account set up because it's doing it through a third party. So just make sure that this is available. Just wanted to make sure that this is available for you guys in case you wanted to add it later on. Again, keeping things super simple today, so I'm going to skip this for now. Now, Xano does allow auth via JWE tokens, and it supports that right out of the box. So here where it asks how will our users log in, we're going to go ahead and select this email option. This is basically saying that our users are going to log in with an email and a password. But if you want to use OAuth and use a provider like Google or Facebook, we also have that too. Great. So let's go ahead and review our workspace settings. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and select Create Workspace. And this will bring us straight to our dashboard. So let's go ahead and tackle the first piece of our application, which was our user authentication. Right? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to allow our user to create an account. And we wanted them to provide us with a name, an email, and a password. So now if we go over to our API endpoints over here on the left-hand side where it says API, this will take us to our API groups. API groups are like a set of folders for our APIs, and this allows us to keep everything organized. So we can create different kinds of folders for different types of APIs, and I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit for some of the ones that we'll be creating. For now, let's go ahead and go into our default folder. And here are the API endpoints that got automatically created for us. For now, we're just going to be focusing on these 3 right here. So if we take a look at what each of these API endpoints do, we can kind of get an idea of what kind of actions we can perform with each one of these. So for example, this auth signup one, it says sign up and retrieve an user authentication token. So this is going to allow our users to sign up to our application. Let's go ahead and explore this specific endpoint. Now, what you see on the screen here is our no-code API builder. It has 3 main sections. We have our inputs. These inputs are the information that we are receiving from the front end. Then we have the function stack. These are the functions that are being executed. And then we have the response. The response is the data that is being returned back to the front end. So if we take a look at this one, we are taking in 3 inputs. We're taking in a name, an email, and a password. And then what is happening in our function stack is we are getting a record from our user table. We're basically saying, let's take a look at the field email and take a look at the input that is being provided from the front end and retrieve a record. If a record, here in this precondition, we're basically saying if a record does exist, that means that the user has already created an account. So we want to go ahead and output this message. The account is already in use. Otherwise, if a record is not found, it means that the user has not yet created an account. So we can add a record in our user table with the information that the user has provided for us. Once we map that out and a record has successfully been added to our table, we create an authentication token that then we can send to the front end. So let's go ahead and test this endpoint out. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and open this database tab here so that we can see our tables that currently exist in our database. We're working with the user one right now. So if we go in here, we can see that we have these fields. These fields were automatically created for us. We didn't have to do anything. We have our ID, created app, name, email, and password. Now, if for your application, you wanted to change these, if you wanted to ask your users for different information or more information, you can do that as well by adding fields on here. So if you wanted to ask for like a birthday, for example, you can add a date or maybe their location. You can add that as well. Today, we're just going to keep it at these items. And let's go ahead and take a look at our endpoint here and try this out. Let's go ahead and add some users. We have this postman like run and debug functionality here, and it allows us to type in information on here. So we can kind of pretend that the information that goes in here is the information that we're getting from the front end, right? So let's say that I'm creating an account for myself. I'll add an email. Perfect. And I'll add a super secure password here. And now when I press run, that would be like if our user is pressing that create account key on our front end. So they press that key, this runs. All of these functions are going to be executed from top to bottom. So first we're checking to see if we can find that user in our database, making sure that they don't already exist, adding that record in our user table, and then creating this authentication token that we see here. Let's go ahead and add a couple more users. So we'll add Chris as a user here. Create another password for Chris. And then we run. And again, we have created a user. If we go into our database here, we have the user database that we just took a look at. If we refresh, we can see that now our records exist in here. So that is great. Now let's take a look at some of these other endpoints. If we graph this auth token, right? So now the user was given an auth token that is returned to the front end. We can actually use this auth token in reverse. So we can see what user is logged in based on the auth token. So this auth me API endpoint allows us to do that. If we go ahead and click on here, we run and debug, and I paste that token that we had just received, and I run this, we can see that Chris is logged in. Now, the times that you may want to do that, for example, is to see like who is logged in, what kind of permissions they have. We also might want to pass this data into our front end. If you remember our little like welcome banner where it said welcome user, we can then add Chris's name on there so that it's a little bit more personalized. So that is like some of the times that you'll want to use this this API endpoint is to know who specifically is logged in, what they have access to, and such. Great. Now, we also wanted to allow our users to sign in. Once they have an account, they should be able to log in with an email and a password. And there's an endpoint for that as well. So let's go back here. And we have this auth login endpoint. Again, we're taking in two inputs. We're taking in that email and the password from the front end. We are getting the record from our user table. We're checking to see, hey, this user provided us with an email. Which record in here has that email address? And then if for some reason we cannot find that user, we're going to get an error. We're also going to validate that password to make sure that the password that they created an account with is the password that they're providing. And then if that does pass, right, if that's true, if those passwords do match up, then we're going to go ahead and create the authentication token for them. So let's go ahead and give this a try. I don't remember the email that I created for myself. There it is. Okay, let's see. I think I already forgot the password that I used. So let's give it a shot. I think it was password 123. Let's see. Oh, perfect. Okay, that was correct. Awesome. So now we have this auth token that, again, we can send back to the front end. We can retrieve the record for Liz and then use that information to manipulate the front end in whatever way that we need. Perfect. Okay, so this is great. We have kind of gone through our Auth API endpoints and talked about how we would implement that functionality for our inventory management system. I created this little guide for you all in case the descriptions in the API endpoints folder on here weren't sufficient. This just kind of gives you a little bit different verbiage in case this makes sense. So please feel free to take a screenshot, and this is also in our inventory management system resources. Right? So now we have gone over how to create an account for a user, what we can do once we have the auth token, and we can get that record for the user that's logged in. And then they can also sign in using the email and the password that they have provided to create an account. And then quickly, I just want to take a pause here because we do have the ability to use user permissions and access control. So a use case for this would be, for example, if we have a role that is a manager, right? If Chris is a manager and Chris is allowed to edit the different products in our table, but then we have staff that is only allowed to view those products, right? We would want to be able to allow to have Chris have specific authority and be able to access different endpoints than what we would for that staff. So that is something that is available that you can implement in your application. And then if you wanted to get more granular access, so for example, we want to give Chris, the manager, access to be able to edit the staff's permissions, you can implement that as well. So now what we are going to do is we are going to start mapping out our data. Let's go ahead and get our tables ready to receive the data that we are going to be providing. So here in our Xano workspace, let's go ahead and go to our database tables. We have our category table and our product table. We're going to start with the category table. And what I'm going to do, actually, what might be easier is if I do a side-by-side view on this so that we can see specifically what fields we want to add to this category table. So we have ID, we have created at, and now we just need to add this category field that is going to be text. So I'll add this field. We're going to go ahead and save that. That one was pretty easy. That is all done. Let's go back to our database. We're going to go into our product table, and we have more fields in here to add. So let's go ahead and add the title. That is going to be the type text. We'll add the price. And for numbers, I just want to quickly mention here that we have the type integer. This is a number without decimals. So it means that these numbers that we add on here have to be whole. Then we have this decimal type down here, a number with decimals. When we're dealing with something like price, we want to have decimals because the price could potentially be like $12.99, right? Something like that. So I'm going to select the decimal field and add price. We'll add our description. That is going to be text as well. And then we have our table reference here. So the way that we can do that is by adding the type table reference right here. And we want to reference our category table. So Xano makes this super easy to add that. Next up, we have the quantity. For the quantity, I'm going to do the integer, a number without decimals. And that is because we can't really have like 1.5 jackets, right? We can't really have like half of a jacket. So we're not going to be using decimals here. We're going to be using whole numbers. So we'll add integer and label this quantity. And then last but not least, we're going to be adding an image. Now, I just want to note here that for the image, we're not storing the image itself in the database. We're storing a reference to that image. We're storing the image metadata. So we're going to go down here to storage, and I'm going to go ahead and select image metadata and label this product image. Great. So now our product table looks good to go. We can now move on to the next step, where we are going to be importing data from an external API into our database. What we are going to be using today is this Big Store API. It's a free resource. It's very simple, keeps things nice and clean for us. So we'll be using both of these endpoints right here to retrieve our products and our categories. And I can actually show you what this looks like if I grab these categories. Or actually, before I do that, let me add this to the chat in case you want to do this as well. Perfect. So if I grab that categories API endpoint and I paste that into my browser, the browser serves as a front end. So if I go ahead and go on here, I can actually see the data that is retrieved from this API endpoint. And the data is an array. It's a list of categories. Pretty simple. The products one is a little bit more complicated. Let's take a look at that one. If I grab that link and I add it over here on my browser, we can see that we have a lot more data in here. Now, if we wanted to see how this is structured, it can definitely get a little bit, confusing because I can't really see what kind of information is available for each of my products. So I like to use this tool. It's called JSON CRUD. I'm going to add it here in the chat as well. And let me open up a tab with this. It is pretty cool. We don't have to create an account or anything. We can go straight to the editor. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy this response. And I'm going to paste it over here. Awesome. So now we get a better visual of what our data looks like. So our data is an array. It's a list of products. Each product is represented by an object. And now we can see more specifically what kind of data lives within each product object. So you zoom out here a little bit. Okay. So now we can see that each product has an ID, a title, a price, description, category, the image, and then the count, the quantity actually is nested in this rating object in here. So that's really good to visualize because now we know where we're going to be able to access this information and then add it into our database table. Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started with adding this into our tables. We're going to do this with an API endpoint. So let's go ahead and go back to our API here. And since we want to keep things nice and organized, let's go ahead and create another API group. I'm going to go ahead and label this external API calls. And now we have this nice group here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add an endpoint, and I'm going to select start from scratch. We can then add a name for this. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is grabbing the categories and saving that to our database table. So I'm just going to name this Bake Store API -categories. For the verb, I'm going to select post because we're going to be adding into our categories table. Feel free to add a description. This is also super nice. Like once you start having a ton of API groups and you want to take a glance and be able to see what each of them are doing, you can add a description on here and be able to see that pretty easily. So let's go ahead and save this. And now we are back to our no-code API builder. So for this, we're not going to be taking anything in from our front end. What we're going to be doing is mainly working within this function stack. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a function. And we have this function, external API request, which is exactly what we want to do. We can provide the URL. So that URL, the one that I put in the chat for the categories, let me grab that. I'm going to paste it over here. And for this specific request, we don't need a ton of information. This one is pretty simple, but a lot of the times when you are working with an API, you may need to add an auth token in your headers and add more information. So just know that that is something that as you're working with external APIs that you may need to add on here. Today, super simple. We're just adding the URL and the text field right here in the URL. I'm going to save this. And we can actually test this out here in our no-code API builder. So what we're doing in our function stack is we're making an API request to that fake store API. And then we are returning that as the variable API_1. And then that is what is being returned as the response. So let's go ahead and try this out here. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And what we can see is that we get a successful response. We have a lot of information on here. Like we have different information of like, was this request successful? When was the date of the request? Things like that. But what I really care about is this results property right here that contains that array of the different categories. That is what I want to map to. So what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to copy this I want to grab this response here because I'm going to use it in the next step. So the way that we're going to be adding these categories to our table is by iterating over each category and adding each one to our table. And we can actually do that with a for each loop. So we can add a function. We have for each loop iterates over a list of items. Perfect. And then we're going to provide the list that we're iterating over. Now, here's the list that we want to access. We can see that it's kind of nested. We have a lot of information there. Xano actually allows us to define the path. So we're going to access that variable API_1, which is this information here, this response, and then select the subpath. I can actually paste the response here, select define, and now I can more easily see where results lives. So now I can actually go in here, go into the response, and then select result. And then Xano automatically generates the dot notation that I need to be able to access that results array. Now, here where it says item, it's just basically saying that as we are iterating over each of these categories, each category is going to be known as an item. So let's go ahead and save this. And what we want to do now is we want to say what we are doing on each iteration. So on each iteration, we're going to be adding a record in our category table. So let's go ahead and add a function here. We'll go into database requests, add a record, and we're going to select our category table. Now, we're saying here, okay, we're going to add a record. For the category name, we want to select that item. So the item is going to be electronics the first time we iterate. It'll be jewelry the second time, men's clothing the third time, women's clothing the fourth time, and so on. So now let's go ahead and save this. And what I'm going to do is actually edit this response here because I want to see what it looks like when this function runs successfully. Now let's rerun, and we can see that we get this success message. We can see that this got added into our database table, and we can actually just double check. Let's go back to our database, take a look at category, and we can see that all of our categories have been added successfully. Okay, so now we have tackled adding our categories into our category table. Let's go ahead and bring in the products. So we're going to do the same thing that we just did. Let's go to our API here. We have this external API calls folder already. Let's go ahead and add an API endpoint. We're going to start from scratch. For this one, I'm going to label this fake store/products. It'll be a post because we're adding to the table. Let's save this. Again, we're not receiving anything from the inputs, and we can get started by adding that external API request function. And let me grab that URL. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to run it because I want to see what that response looks like. Awesome. Perfect. So again, we get all of this additional information on here. What I really want to take a look at is this result array where all of the information exists for our product. Okay, so now this one has two kind of use cases, right? Where we're adding the category, but as we can see here in our results array, each product, the category is the name, right? It's not a table reference. So we're going to have to work with that. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to grab the category ID for the category that belongs to each product. And then the image as well. We're getting the image URL here. But what we want to do is we're going to want to grab that image, create the image metadata, and then be able to save that into our database table. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this. The first thing that we're going to do is create our for each loop because we want to iterate over each product. So let me grab that function here. Let me make sure to grab this response here. The list that I want to iterate over, I'll find that using this define subpath functionality here. I'm going to go into and grab that result. Okay, great. And then as we are iterating over each product is known as an item. So let me go ahead and save this. Okay, so now we have this information, but let's go ahead and figure out what the category ID is going to be so that we can successfully add these records into our database table in the format that we want. So for us to find the category ID for each one of these, we can actually do a get record function. We're going to be able to access that record from our category table and grab that ID. So let's go ahead and try that out. Let's add a function here. We'll do a database request, get a record from our category table. And then we're going to edit the field name here because we want to take a look at that category field. And we want to grab the record that has each item's category field. So let me just rephrase that so that maybe it's a little bit clearer. So what we're doing is we're making a request. We're saying get a record from our category table. We want to take a look at the field category. So we're looking here. And then on each iteration, the object is known as item. And we're grabbing the category that exists here. So we're saying, take a look at the field in our database table, and I want to know which record has men's clothing. So for instance, this would be this record, and then we're returning that record. So now that we've mapped that out, we can go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and do an example here really quick. That way we can see what this looks like. If you ever want to stop your function at any point and be able to receive, to return a variable, for example, we can add a stop and debug button here. It stops execution and prints out data. And I want to see what that category _1 variable looks like. Oops. Perfect. Let me save this. And now if I run this, we can see that I get the category record here, men's clothing with the ID 3. So now I can grab this ID and use that to map each record's category and then add that to our database table. Perfect. Now, before I forget, let me disable this. I always leave it and then wonder why I'm not getting the expected output. Okay. So now we have figured out a way to get the category ID for each product. The next step that we want to consider is how we are going to deal with our images. So in order for us to be able to successfully add the image into our database table, we have to get that image. We have to then create the metadata and then save that into the table. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add another function here. And we actually have this in file storage down here. You can select create file resource. And then for this, for the file name, we can select or type whatever we would like. So I'm just going to go ahead and say product.jpg. And then for the file data, here is where I'm going to be mapping to that URL, right? So if we take a look at here, the URL exists in the image property of each item. So I'm going to say item.image. Perfect. And then we want to return that variable. I'm just going to go ahead and save file and save this. Okay. So now we're grabbing that image and then we want to create the image metadata. So let's go ahead and grab that, create image metadata function. And then what we want to add here is for the value, we want to grab that file that we just created, and then we are going to return that as image. Awesome. So now we have a way of getting our category ID, and now we have a way of successfully adding those images into our database table. So lastly, the thing that we need to do is grab that function where we add a record to our product table. And what we're going to do is map everything out on here. So we can actually say for each item, grab the item title, right? Because that's what it is over here. I'm basically mapping everything out. Item title, the price, item dot price, description, item dot description, the category ID. Now for this, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Because we're going to be accessing the variable that we created up here with the get records from category function. And then that variable has the ID living in there. So we can map to the ID. And then the quantity is nested in this ratings object. So what we can do is actually grab the object here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the item subpath so I can map to that. I'll define this and find the count. Perfect, super easy. And then for the product image, we're going to use the variable that we get back from the create image metadata function. So let's go ahead and grab that. That was image. And now we have mapped everything out successfully so that each record can be added into the product table. Let's go ahead and save this. And no stop and debugs. Cool. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and change my response here to the product_1 so that I can see what the success or what we're getting from this add record in product function. And now when I run this, it does take, I think it takes about like 20 seconds for this to run. So now we have this success result here. We can see that our products got added successfully in our product table. Let's go back and check it out. In our database, we go to product. Awesome. So now we see here that we have all of our products. We have the title, price, description, this category ID. It's mapping to our category table. We have the quantity, and then we have the product images. So this is awesome. We have data to work with now. Like, we should celebrate. I'm going to add some of those little confetti things in the chat. Now, let's go back to our slides here really quick. That way we can review everything that we have done so far. We are almost there, right? So we've gone over our Auth Endpoints. We have added our product and category data with that external API. So next up, we are going to learn how to add, retrieve, edit, delete products from our product table. Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll go back to let me make it a little bit wider so that the slides aren't as distracting. There we go. Okay, let's go back to our API endpoints. We're going to go into our default folder. Again, these were the API endpoints that got automatically generated for us. And if we scroll down, we can see that we have all of these endpoints for our product table. Now, each of these API endpoints has a different verb next to it that allows us to know what is happening in that API endpoint. So just really quickly, we wanted to review that and give you all this resource of what that means. So when you see the word post, it means creating a new record. Get means that we're retrieving data. Put or patch is updating. Put is typically when you're replacing the entire record with updated data. And patch is when we're just updating certain pieces of that record. Then we have delete, which goes hand in hand with deletes. So just wanted to share that with you in case it's confusing when you are on this page. Now you know specifically like what's happening here. So get, we're retrieving the product data here. So if we go back and take a look at what kind of functionality we wanted to provide here, right? We need an API endpoint that we can call so that we can get all of the product information. So in order to do that, we can actually use this API endpoint here. It queries all the product records. This one is pretty simple. Let's go ahead and try it out. Basically what it's doing is just has a function in here that is querying all the records from our product table. Let's try it out by running this. And we can see that we have all of our product data that is then going to be sent to the front end. And then in the front end, we can use that data to display our product catalog. Awesome. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the next one, adding a product. Now, this one right here, the post, we can add a record into our product table. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Now, this one would be pretty simple, but in our case, we are working with images. So I do just want to pinpoint something here that we're going to be using in some of the other API endpoints. We're going to go through this, that way you can see specifically what is going on here. So we have our inputs, everything looks great, but this image input right here is actually the image metadata type. And what we need to do is we actually need to get that file, and then we need to create the metadata, right? So when a user is adding a product, they would be uploading an image for us that then gets later added into the database table. So we're not going to be using this input type right here. I'm actually going to go ahead and hide it. And what we need instead here is we want the file resource. So we can go into storage here and grab that file resource input, and I'm going to title it image. Okay. Perfect. So now we are all good to go with our inputs here. Now, since we are grabbing that image from the front end, we're grabbing it from our inputs. We need to create the image metadata that is then going to be added into our database table. So let's go ahead. We're going to have to add a function on here. And we're going to create the image metadata. And then the value for this is going to be coming from our input image. And then we can return that as the image. Perfect. Okay. So then now what we can do is we can add the record in our product table. I'm going to drop this function down here because I want to create that image metadata first. Let's see what is happening in here. We're mapping out all that data. And now for the product image, what we want to grab is this image variable here that we're getting once we create the image metadata. So let's grab that. Whoops. I grabbed the wrong one. Variable image. There we go. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and save this. Now this looks all good to go. Let's go ahead and try this out. If our user is adding a new product into our catalog, we can choose an image here. If I grab this little baseball hat here, they can provide a title for this. Let's just say hat. The price is $12.99. Description, cool hat. The category ID will say 3. And then the quantity, we just got a shipment. So we will say 100. Okay, so now we have all the data that the users provided. If we run this, we can see that we have successfully added a product to our product table. Let's go back to our product table and just check it out to make sure that we see it in there. And here it is. Perfect. Okay. So now we have tackled that piece of functionality. Let's go back to our API endpoints here. Again, we can delete a product. This part is pretty simple. We're providing a product ID and then deleting that product from our product table. So if I run this, the one that we just created was this one down here with the ID 21. So now if I run this, we don't get anything as a response. We're not receiving anything. What is just basically happening here is we're just deleting that product from the product table. So if we go back to our table here and I refresh, it is no longer there. Awesome. Okay. Now we have gone through that piece of functionality. And now let's talk about editing a product record. So that is the instance where a user can go in and edit a product, right? So for example, let's say that this record with the ID 1, maybe there's a sale going on and the price for this is going to be $50. So what we can do is we can use this API endpoint here to edit the product. This API endpoint is going to require a little bit more work than the previous ones to make sure that it is working properly. So first of all, let's tackle the image right here. If you remember correctly, we can't use this input, so we're going to go ahead and hide it. And then what we want instead here is that file resource. If somebody is uploading a new image, let's go ahead and save that here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and build this out and then take a moment to explain it so that it starts to make sense on like why I'm doing certain things. Again, this was a little bit trickier than the previous ones because we may hit some errors along the way. So I want you to kind of experience that and see how this would be built out. Okay, so now we have our image that we're taking in. Let's go ahead and add a function here where we're going to be creating the metadata from this. And we're taking in that input image and then returning this as the, well, I'll just say product image to label it something different. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's say that we stop there, right? Let's say that we are taking in this information, we're creating the image metadata from the file resource that we're receiving, and then we're editing the record in our database table. We'll unhide this. We'll say that this is the product image variable. What's happening here? Let's see, variable. There it is. Awesome. Okay, let's say this. Okay, let's say that we stop here and that we run this, right? Our user goes in, provides the product that they want to change. We're changing this and we want it to be $50. Let's run this. Okay, so now we get our first error here. We're saying that we're missing file resource. Now, if we go over to our debugger here, we can actually see a little bit more information where that error is happening. So it looks like we are missing something here from our create image from file function, this first one right here. And the reason is that this is trying to create the image metadata for the file resource in our inputs. But in this case, our user did not want to update the image. They just wanted to update the price, right? So what we can do is we can add a conditional that checks to see if the user is providing us with an image. If they're providing us with an image, we can create the image metadata. Otherwise, we can do something else. So let's go ahead and add that conditional statement, also known as an if-then statement. And we can define exactly what we are looking for. So what I want to know is if in our input image, the user has provided a file. So what I'm going to say is that the input is not null, meaning that I want to check to see if that image exists. I'm going to go ahead and save this and drag this to the top because this is the first thing that I want to check. So if our image input is not null, meaning that something exists in there, I want to create the image metadata. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to label this product image and with a value null. So now what is happening here is we're checking to see our input. We're saying if the user does provide an image, we're going to go ahead and create that image metadata and return that as product image. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and create this variable product image that is going to be equal to null, meaning that there's nothing there, right? So either way, this product image variable is going to have something assigned to it. It's either going to be the image metadata or null. Awesome. Okay. So now let's say that that everything is looking good. We like what we see. Let's go ahead and try this out again. We have our product ID 1 and we're editing that record 1 and we want to change the price to 50. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay. So now we get a success response, right? It seems like everything worked correctly, but what happened here, right? We have a couple of things that are missing. Our title isn't there. The price did get changed. The description is gone. Everything is gone, right? We have this this product image here that is null. So let's start to debug here on what could be happening, right? So in order for us to be able to edit this product successfully, we are going to have to check to see if the user is providing us with anything. If the user is not providing us with information, then we want to leave things as is. And if we want to leave things as is, we want to know what exactly exists there at the moment. To know what exists in there, we can do a get record. So let's go ahead and do a database request. Get record. We're going to be hitting our product table. We want to find the record with the ID that we're getting from the front end. We're going to save this. Okay. So now we can get the information that is coming. Now we can get the information from the product that is being edited, right? So if I add a stop and debug button here, I just want to see what product, whoops, let me see what this variable is. Product _1. I want to know what that output looks like. Product _1. Awesome. Okay. So now if I run this with the product ID 1, I can see that this is what I get. Perfect. So now I can start mapping this out. Let's go into our edit product in record. And then again, what we're going to do is check to see if we are receiving information from the front end. We have this filter. It's called first not null, or first not empty, I'm sorry. This is basically checking to see if what we are receiving is either null, 0, or an empty string. And then if we are receiving any of those options, right? If we're receiving 0, null, or an empty string, then we want to set the value equal to what already exists in our record. We can map that with this variable that we're getting from get record from product. So let's go ahead. Let me access that variable. So for our title, I want to map to product _1 title. And I'm going to do the same thing for all of these, right? So I'm going to grab the filter here. I'll do this quickly so that we can move on to the next step. Perfect. So we'll do this for each one of them. Do this for the description. Grab that variable. Perfect. We'll update that. We'll grab the category ID as well. First not empty. That product variable map to that. Awesome. Okay, almost there. 2 more to go. Okay, let's see. First, not empty, and then variable. Oops, misspelled that one. I always do it at least once, and then I get an error, and I'm like, what happened? What went wrong? And then I just have to check all the spelling for all of them. Okay. First not empty. Whoops. What? Oh, I see. Okay. I'm gonna go to all first not empty, and then map to our variable product. And I believe that image or that field was product image. It is. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So we're looking good. Perfect. So now we're going to check to see if we are receiving anything from the front end. If not, we're going to be adding what already exists there. Okay, so let's go ahead and we can actually run this again and see what we get. So let's save this. Let's edit this record here. So now I want to add the title. If we go back to what our data originally looked like, I can grab this. We'll say that the price is 50. We'll grab the description. Whoops. I'll just type something in here. Cool jacket. Cool. Okay, awesome. Category ID. We'll say 1, and then we'll say 50. We can choose a file. The only one that I had prepared was this hat one, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Let's make sure that I don't have any stop and debunk functions here that are enabled. So now if I run this, we can see that our product got successfully edited. We can see all of the information living on here now. And now if we just want to edit the price, we can do that. The price is the only thing that changed. Everything else stayed the same. So now we have tackled that piece of functionality. That was a little bit more advanced example for sure, but just really wanted to walk you through it, especially some of those error messages that we see sometimes. As you're working through your API function stack, you may see some of those. You can pause, you can add stop and debug functions, you can access the debugger to really figure out what could be happening in there, and then be able to make changes from there. Okay, we only have one more thing to build out, which is our filter products by category. This one is a lot more simple, I promise. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's go back to our API here. We can create another group to keep things nicely organized. I'm going to label this filters. And we can add one from scratch. We're going to create our own one. I'm going to go ahead and label this filter category. And we're getting records. Perfect. Okay. So now starting from scratch, if we're filtering by specific category, for our input, we're going to take in an integer. That's going to be our category ID. And then what we're going to be doing in the function stack is we're going to be querying all the records from our product table, right? So this is going to return all of the products that currently exist in there. What we can do now is we can actually add a custom query in here. And we can add a conditional. So we can say, I want to grab all of the products from my product table where the product.category ID is the same one that I'm receiving from my inputs from the front end. And if I save this, right, and I run this, And now let's say that we want to get all of the products that have the category 2, which is jewelry. And we go ahead and run. We can now filter those products. So all of these products that I'm getting here have the category 2. We can then grab this information, send it back to the front end. This is what we're going to be displaying from our front end to our user once they select that they want to filter by the category, by this category that we just typed in, right? Another cool thing, I just want to add this really quickly, are add-ons, right? So let's say that I want to see the category ID, but I also want to see the name of the category. We have this cool thing called add-ons, and it allows us to enrich our data. You can add it by going into output, clicking on add-on. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. We're going to be hitting our category table. I want to see a single item, and I want to map by the category ID. Let's go ahead and create this category. This is what my category field is going to look like now in my response. I can actually customize this because I don't want to know when it was created at. I just want to see the ID and the name of the category. And if I save this, press done, when I type in the category 2 here and I run this, now I see that I can actually get the name of the category as well. So I have the ID 2, and that ID belongs to the category jewelry. We can see that for each of our items. Okay, perfect. So that is it. We have completed our project today.